Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Book Goodies, the author series of podcasts. I'm your host, Deborah Carney, and I am joined today by author Mohana. Hi, Mohana. How are you?
Hi, Deborah. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, my name's Mohanalakshmi Rajakumar, and people tend to be intimidated by that because there's a lot of A's when you see it in print. But I go by Mohana, or kind of my online alias is Moha Doha.
Okay.
And that's because I've lived in Doha, Qatar for the last 7 years. I was originally born in India, but moved to the States when I was very young, and then moved to Qatar in 2005. So I have a degree in English literature, I have a PhD in English literature, and so I teach, and I've done a lot of academic work and academic publications, but this year is my year of being in India. I've published 6 ebooks, everything from memoir to novels, because I wanted to try something different from the academic and commercial publishers that I've used.
Well, and that's very exciting because being that you are in academia and that you are, you've written and taught, literature, it's always fun for you to break loose and say, okay, it's time for me to do what I've been teaching other people to do. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's time to tell my stories.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Now, tell us a little bit about before we started recording, you told me a little bit about how you went down the traditional publishing route, attempted for your fiction, and then found that wasn't a good fit for you. Can you explain that to us a little bit?
Sure. Well, it's crazy because my latest book that's out, it's contemporary fiction, but I've been kind of calling it romance as a way of finding a niche readers group, because that's so important. Even if you self-publish, it's even more important because there's so many other people that you're competing against, both commercially and self-publishing, that you identify an audience. And in my, kind of billing this as a contemporary multicultural romance, because it's a love triangle that happens overseas among 3 very different people, I wrote to a prominent writer whose fan I am on Facebook, and I said, would you mind blurbing this book for me? Because even though you're in India, that means you have to do twice as much marketing in some cases. And she said, sure, I'm really busy, but send me a chapter and I'll see. And so I sent her the chapter, and she said, wow, this is good. Send me some more. And so I sent her some more. I sent her 2 more chapters, and then she said, this is really good. I'm going to introduce you to my agent. And this project took me 3 years to write. I hired a professional editor, and then I even hired a professional copy editor after that. I mean, I put a lot of work into this book because I really believed in it. And I had queried, people over the years, and I had even gone to a conference in New York last year and had 12 agents say, send me samples, send me queries, send me this and that and the other thing. And I did. And of course, over the course of the year, from last July to this July, they all ended up declining. So, she says, I'll introduce you to my agent. And she did introduce me to her agent, which was so kind. And then I sent everything to the agent because she said that's what I should do, even though the book has already been published. It's already up on Amazon.
Right.
And the agent wrote me back today and just said, thank you. That was it.
That's it?
There wasn't, thank you, we're not taking clients. Thank you, this isn't what we're reading. Thank you, we'll read this and get back to you. Nothing. Like, no indication of anything, And, I'm not picking on this agent because obviously, her author introduced her to somebody that she doesn't know anything about. But that kind of reception from the commercial industry is what really made me look at self-publishing, because I had actually worked for a publisher for 3 years. I worked for the Bloomsbury, a joint venture by Bloomsbury with Qatar Foundation here in Doha. And Bloomsbury, of course, famous by Harry Potter and Elizabeth Gilbert and a lot of other really high-profile Khalid Hosseini writers. So, I've been on both sides of the desk. I've been both there as a writer and as a publisher. And, the discussions that publishers and I imagine agents are having are all pretty similar, and they have to do with sales figures and, all those
Do you fit their niche, and do you fit their profile, and are you in their wheelhouse as far as what they're comfortable with, and a lot of other things that authors don't think of, but you as so when you work with a publishing house, you understand that, you can't take every good book that comes through. And
and even books that, certain people would champion would get shot down by the marketing people or so the decisions felt very kind of arbitrary to me. And so with everything that I knew about publishing, with my academic background, in last August, actually, it's been almost a full year, I set out, I've been writing for over 10 years. So I had short story collections and novels. I had a memoir. I had all these blog entries I had done while I was pregnant with our first child, for kind of just what it's like to be a professional woman that's having a baby and being a first-time mother. I had blogged for 2 years for the UK version of the Writers Market.
Oh, beautiful.
So I just had all this material, and I thought, okay, let's do a test. And this other material was in a much closer state of being ready for publication than the novel that just came out
right
a few weeks ago. So I made my own publication schedule, and I learned how to make YouTube trailers, and it was a really, actually a very enriching year in which I learned so many things about social media and cover design and, building an author platform, things I already thought I knew because I had a website, I had Twitter, I had Facebook, but really kind of galvanizing all of those towards my books, which I'm still learning a lot about.
Yep. Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point, because I'm in internet marketing. I mean, that's what I do for a living, is I help people sell things on the internet. And when it came to marketing my own books, I'm like, I'll just toss it up here on Amazon. I'll do a little social media. Life will be great. And it's like, wait, what? Why isn't, why am I not selling this out the door? What's going on here? And you begin to realize, I tell people all the time, use videos and, interact with your people on your websites and do this and do that. And I hadn't done all those things for myself. And you have to change it, because how you would do it for a client, and you have to treat yourself as a client and sit down and look at yourself and say, okay, what would I tell someone else to do? And then I have to do it myself. So you're kind of in the same situation. You know what needs to be done, but you didn't always know the technical things behind it. And it was a great learning experience for you to pull all those things from your, life before self-publishing and put them into your own self-publishing.
Absolutely. And, there's nothing like, preaching to yourself, if you will. You really learn by doing. I mean, I had a website, I had a blog, and I had both of those things for about 4 years prior to launching these books. But and I blogged once a week, but never on the same day, never really and I used tag clusters and those kinds of things. But once you get into the field of indie publishing, you realize, okay, actually, there's a lot to be gained from having a disciplined schedule. And a lot of people don't talk about discipline in writing, but if you don't have discipline, you're not going to get very far.
And that's another really good point, because a lot of the people I work with, myself included, are not people that like deadlines and schedules. And I'm really amazing myself with this series of podcasts, because I literally hate schedules. I hate deadlines, hate schedules. There's only a couple people in the world that I will meet a deadline for. And everybody else is like, yeah, okay, whatever. And in the last 3 weeks, I have had, 7 to 8 podcasts scheduled every single day. And I don't have a problem with that, and that's kind of scary to me because that's, you know, something that I just don't like. And discipline, you know, bringing discipline as a writer, a lot of writers don't realize that they are disciplined in a way, but it's because they're setting their own schedule. And when someone says you have to have a discipline, they don't realize they are. And then other writers, of course, just, you know, write catch as catch can. You know, they just write whenever they feel like it, and they don't do it every day, and they're not building their platform. And those are the ones that are probably going to be just putting their books up, and friends and family will purchase the book, and that'll be about it.
Yeah, I think it's so true that, you know, people think that artists are, you know, means you're kind of crazy, and that you don't have a schedule, and you sleep erratically, and all these kinds of things. But if you look at people who've been in the industry for a long time, like Murakami, for example, you know, who writes 1,000-page books. I'm reading his memoir. It's actually called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, and it's actually his running memoir, because he's run, you know, lots and lots of marathons. And it's basically about how he became to be a marathon runner by accident. And, you know, there's a lot of deliberate practice and thought. And I don't know what in our culture, like the artist culture, makes us think that it's not hard work.
No, it makes other people think that it's not hard work.
Yeah, but, you know, we subscribe to, you know, also there's all these things about, like, well, Hemingway was a drunk, and so-and-so was this and that and the other thing. And maybe they're the exceptions, but they also worked really hard. You know, he would write 600 pages and on page 601 say, oh, this is where my novel starts, and throw the rest of it out, you know? Yep. So...
Well, and I think that goes to that famous quote. I'm not sure who said it, but I'm sure someone will come in the comments and tell me. There's a fine line between genius and madness, you know, and which side of the line are you going to be on, and how far are you going to push it? And I think that the writers that understand that they're going into another world when they write, and that they can come back from that world, those are the writers that are geniuses. The ones that go mad are the ones that let their work or their stories overtake them. And I think that's good to point out, because sometimes writers are afraid to go into that extra depth because they're worried about crossing the line. And I think that, you know, as artists, you know, most artists, they do what they do and they don't consider it work. And the same thing with writers. They do what they do, but they enjoy it so much they don't consider it to be work. And that's what makes other people think that it's not hard and it's not work.
Well, and it's like you said, you know, normally you have to be willing to do things that you wouldn't do otherwise for the sake of your work. You know, you're normally not a scheduled person, and you look forward to these like 7-8 podcasts, you know, a day. And so that's, you know, that's when you know that you're doing something you're passionate about. My students last semester, I had a couple students doing research with me on a few of the books, and between the teaching and the writing, and, you know, I have a family, and someone was like, but you like to be crazy. And I said, yeah, but I don't, it's not that I like to be crazy. It's just that I don't have, if the choice is between doing this and not doing it, that's a non-choice, right? You know? And that's when you know you're doing something because you love it. So,
yes, exactly. When I started out on deciding that I wanted to do a series of podcasts with writers, I put a query into the Help a Reporter Out newsletter that goes out 3 times a day. And that's where you found me. And I expected to get, maybe 10, 20 people that would want to be on a podcast. And I got 77 responses.
Wow.
And out of those, there were people that were agents or small publishing houses that had me talk to multiple authors. So I think by the end of the series, just from that Harrow query, I'm going to have over 100 interviews. And the thing about the interviews is they're all so different and they're all so special. And every single person I have interviewed has been so creative and so fun to talk to that I want to keep doing them. And that's something I didn't expect. I expected it to be fun, and I love doing podcasts, and I do several other podcasts on different topics. And this has just turned into a great learning experience for me, and I hope for our listeners, because the people that I get to talk to, someone like you, I would never have been able to contact. And it gives you a way to talk about your writing style and your decisions, which helps other people decide what they should be doing and understand that what they're doing isn't wrong. Like, someone might be doing what you're doing. They're a mom, they're working, they're writing, they're doing all these different things, and people are telling them they're crazy. And yet, no, you're not crazy. It's something that you need to do, and it's fun, and you enjoy it.
Well, and that's just, as a writer these days, you have to be open. You have this idea about podcasts, you put it out there, and you got an amazing response. And I really feel that social media has helped us do that. I remember I was actually sitting on the couch that I'm sitting on now, talking to you, when I saw a post on Twitter about, make your own book trailers. It's really easy. That was sort of the title. Yeah. And I always kind of favorite things when I want to go back and look at them later. And I read the guy's post, and it seemed straightforward enough. And I was totally a PC user my whole life. I didn't know anything about the world of Mac, but I thought, okay, let me give it a shot. We had some Mac computers down at the library, so I went down to the library, and within an hour, I had made a 30-second book trailer. And that's the kind of, you have to keep learning new things and kind of adapting to what you're doing in order to keep it fresh.
Yep. And you have to present information to people in the way they want it presented to them. So the reason why it's important to have YouTube trailers nowadays is because the new generation, the next generation behind us is, or behind you, I'm a few generations above you, the next generation is using YouTube as their search engine.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they want to connect with people more than just, going to Google or Bing or whatever and, seeing things in print. They want to go to YouTube and see somebody talking or hear somebody's voice or see something visual that relates to what they're looking for, even if it is a book.
Yeah, I had, when I learned the lesson about YouTube was when I started a newsletter. So I started a newsletter about 2 months ago, and it's a 2-column newsletter that pops up in your email, 4 articles, 2 in the top, 2 in the bottom.
Right.
And then it's through MailChimp, which is a free service, which is great. And so the great thing that MailChimp lets you do is, and I don't work for them or anything, right, but it's just amazing how many free tools are out there. It's completely free. And what it tells you is where people go from your newsletter. So what I found out from my first MailChimp newsletter mailer was that anyone that clicked, I had 4 places you could click.
Right.
90% of them clicked on YouTube. And, of those 90%, they watched at least 1 or more videos.
Nice.
That's
really important to know.
Yeah, so now I know every time I do a newsletter, I have to have something that's related to YouTube in there, because that's what people gravitate towards. And I found myself doing it today. I got a newsletter, and I thought one of the articles was interesting, so I clicked through to the website and I read the post, and I thought, I just gave someone a stat.
Yeah. All of a sudden you're like, if I click on this, they'll think I like it. It kind of, but most people don't think like that. They just open a newsletter and either trash it or click on something, and it's really interesting to follow and see what it is they click on. So that's something interesting I didn't know about MailChimp. I am familiar with the service, and like you said, you're not related to it or anything. It just happens to be a really cool. It's free to a point, and when you're just starting out, that free access is going to be very, very important to you. And then, when you're ready to grow, you can go into one of their paid packages. But it's still a very powerful tool for you to start out with. And every writer should have a newsletter. Because, first of all, you're a writer. You should be able to put content in a newsletter.
Right.
And second of all, you need some place for people to, once they've hit your website or your social media or whatever, that they can go where you have their information. So if they like your Facebook fan page or they follow you on Twitter, the rules can change on any of those sites at any point. And you need to have them be pointed to something that you are in control of, so that you have the ability to contact people who have expressed an interest in your writing, to be able to say, hey, here's my blog posts, and oh, by the way, here's my new book, what do you think? And, I'll give away 5 copies to the first, 5 people that contact me that will promise me to do a review. And, it gives you a way to reach out and engage your audience. And in the world of such fractured social media, there's so much social media out there, you need to have a place that's home base where you can send people so that they, they'll say, they don't have to say to themselves, I found this really cool author and I don't remember where it was.
Exactly. Well, and as you were saying, if you're a writer, you should be able to generate a newsletter. Actually, the newsletter is also a great way for you to keep track of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I find my newsletter, I think like, oh yeah, okay, I know I have a newsletter coming out. What am I going to put in it? And then it actually makes you get out there and do stuff, mm-hmm. So that you will have stuff to talk about. And I think that's really the key part that a lot of people are missing out at these conferences and these other blog posts and stuff. And it's great. I mean, Kindle and Amazon, Smashwords, Nook, I mean, whatever you're publishing to, it is important to know how to format and even the writing. That's obviously the most important part. You have to have a good product. But I don't think people talk enough about how the patience that you have to have. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I am right now. It's been a year. This book, I actually released all the other books, kind of a month and a half at a time in order to test out the newsletter, the book trailers, the website, grow my Twitter following from 1,000 to about 6,200 now, I think. All of that takes time. And that's the thing that we really don't talk about enough.
People think that they finish a manuscript and boom, they should just put it up, and they skip the parts that you did, where you had a professional editor come in, and you had a copy editor come in after the other editor came in, and then you had you have a professionally developed book cover, and you did all the things a publisher would do, and then you put the book up there. Whereas there's a lot of you had the patience to go through the steps, where there's a lot of people, me included, you get a good idea, you put together a book, and you can have it on Amazon in like 24 hours. And can you do it? Yeah. Should you do it? Probably not.
Right.
That first version of your book isn't going to be the one, and then as soon as you put it up, it's not going to sell. That's the other place where patience, has to come in, is that don't think you're a failure because you don't sell immediately when you go up on Amazon, because then comes the marketing part.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we're all guilty of that rush when you hit, upload, and then you get the email that says like, your book is now available, but it's definitely, and despite going through all those steps, I still, like this morning, I got a message from a reviewer who was like, this is a great book, but I think it could have used some more copy editing. I'm like, are you serious? How much editing this book has been through? But
I think she commented on one of my books too that I had thoroughly copy edited.
Yeah, so but that's the reader's experience, and you kind of have to take it on board, and you have to realize that if this is what you're doing, then this is what you're in for,
right?
And that is the beauty, I will say, of ebooks, is that I was able to open up the last document, change a few things. Not everything that I agree with, but the things that I agreed with, and then I sent it off to the editor. Mm-hmm. So there's an upside and a downside, but the patience that's required is not for the faint of heart. I mean, you would think if you can sit down and write a book and commit to it, you'd have enough patience to for the marketing and all of that. But I don't know. I don't know if everyone does.
And a lot of people don't, because they don't understand the marketing part. They think Amazon does all the marketing for them. Smashwords does all the marketing for them. Lulu does all the marketing for them. And even people who are published by a traditional publishing house, they think that publishing house is going to do all the marketing for them. And in today's economy, they've cut way back on marketing. So I've heard from numerous authors that, you know, when they query a publishing house, big or small, one of the things they get back is, how are you going to market your book? What's your platform? What do you bring to the table if we publish your book? And in the past, that wasn't part of the equation. And so writers are getting an eye-opening experience, and, you know, people who are really good writers may not be really good marketers. And that's where you need to, either you need to learn how to do the stuff yourself, or you have to, you know, reach out to other people, you know, maybe a co-op, you know, writing group where you can help promote each other's things on your websites. Or, you know, there's a lot of creative ways that if you don't know how to market, that you can figure out how to get involved with people that do market, and maybe trade services, or find services from somebody that is not that expensive, because, you know, and you can help them build their portfolio by, you know, having them. But don't cut corners either, because if you want to be a success, you got to have, like you said, if you don't have editors, it's an expense that you can't skip. You know, you've got to do it, because you're too close to your book, and your friends and family are probably going to be too close to your book. Because even though they may say they're, you know, being critical or whatever, they hear your voice in the book, and they can relate to things that you have in the book that other people might not be able to relate to.
Yeah, and or you have my family who they just really don't care. You know, I mean, it's not that they don't care, but, you know, I was just at home, and, you know, I saw my brother, and he said to me in this restaurant, "Oh, so you published a book?" And I turned to my husband. My brother and my husband are really good friends, and I said, "You better get him away from me, because his life is in danger." Mm-hmm. You know, or, you know, you're like, "Mom, did you hit like on my Amazon page?" You know, she's like, "Oh yeah, I meant to do that, but I've been really busy." You know, so it's like,
Mom, it's a click.
Yeah, I mean, you have to believe in yourself, because and what's really interesting about indies is that the people that you think, you know, your family or your friends, they're not necessarily the ones that come around,
right?
You know, and that's the beauty of books as well, is that you get to make. I mean, I've met some amazing people through the just through the indie world, through Twitter and everything. Mm-hmm. And it's really other people who end up believing in the stories that you're telling, believing in what you're doing, and you kind of develop this community of support, and that does take time, and you get better and better at it. I just read John Locke's book, not the guy from Lost, but the real John Locke, the writer. Yeah. I think he was the second guy to sell 1 million copies on Kindle.
Okay.
And he talks a lot about that, about cultivating relationships, and then turning those relationships over into fans.
Yes. And it's like any other industry. You know, you never know who you talk to today on Twitter or on Facebook, or even the people that I've been interviewing in this author series. You know, mm-hmm. I got an email back, and, you know, I read about what they were doing, and I asked them to be on the podcast, and then they scheduled, or their publicist scheduled, and I didn't think anything about it. And then I start talking to these folks who I've never heard of before, and all of a sudden it's a celebrity. And I'm like, Okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't know that before I started the podcast, because maybe I would have treated you differently. But it's like, you don't know who's going to be the person that you're talking to, that, you don't really pay attention to what their reach is. And then all of a sudden you find out it's somebody with 1 million Twitter followers that's going to get you all kinds of attention and traffic to your website. And you always have to be nice, and you have to be respectful. And even if you disagree with someone, or like you said, you got a negative review, you can respond back to that with, thank you, we'll check into it and make sure that, everything is ship-shape. And, you don't blast them back and say, I had this edited and copy edited 5 times. What the hell are you talking about? Because that could be your next cheerleader if they think that you're listening to them and paying attention to them too.
No, absolutely. And it's like, when I saw that review, I just thought, okay, well, you know what? She still gave me 5 stars, so it wasn't like she was, being punitive or anything. And I thought, okay, well, fair enough. I mean, this is my second novel, so I'm still learning. I'm still, figuring out how it works, and it was funny because this particular person, I had actually asked her for my editorial. I had asked her for some editorial context, so I did kind of have to get in there and say, it was the person, I did work with the person that you recommended, so I just want you to know I'm taking this seriously. So
right,
you have to have thick skin, and you have to be able to take feedback.
Yep, and not take it personally, because they're not beating you up; they're beating the book up, and something technical about the book. Not exactly. Something about, I hate your character. It's just something that, they like your character. She gave you a 5-star rating. They like your character. They like your style of writing. They just found a couple things that weren't how they thought they were supposed to be in the, punctuation and grammar.
Yeah. And it wasn't even that in this particular case. It had to do with timeline.
Okay. Very important.
Yeah.
Now, in your writing process, when you're writing your novels, do you use like an outline, or are you a seat of your pants kind of writer, or do you have ideas and you storyboard them? What kind of structure do you use when you're writing?
Well, I definitely am. I'm not a kind of seat of the pants writer unless I get into a scene.
Right.
And then sometimes you never know what's going to happen within the scene itself. But I do generally have a story. Usually my projects start with a question. So this book started with a question, how are people of this generation going to find love? Like, in the world in general. Mm-hmm. People that come from similar cultural backgrounds to where I grew up as a South Asian girl in the U.S., and I had parents that had very different ideas about what love meant and what happiness and all success, all those kinds of things. And then because I was living in Qatar, I was really particularly interested in Qatari society and Qatari young people. Mm-hmm. And so the intersection of all those things that became this book. So I kind of start with a central question. Usually 1 or 2 characters will kind of emerge, and then I pretty much know what the trajectory is going to be. I know that that there'll be the strong female protagonist who the male protagonist will fall in love with, and then there'll be a complication. What I didn't realize with this book in particular, and this is when sort of like you get in there and you start writing, and then things just don't feel like they're working. I started the book at one place. Actually, a part of the book takes place in London during the Olympics that are coming up.
Okay.
So I started the book there, and then it just didn't feel right. So then I had to back up and add an entire new section that was the start of the book that I hadn't planned on, that was in no outline, that wasn't really thought of at all, about in Qatar. So I thought, actually, no, this book has to start in Qatar. The readers need to understand what all the forces are at play. So when Abdullah, one of the main characters, shows up in London, at the height of the Olympics and has nowhere else to stay and is in this apartment in close confines with his fiance's roommate, and his fiance is nowhere to be found,
Mm-hmm.
the reader knows, okay, something big is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a little bit of both. I mean, I'm not like a rigid outline, but there's some people who outline and then that's basically their entire book.
Mm-hmm.
I use the outline as kind of a guide so that I can get to the story easier.
That's what I like. And I love that you said, and again, like I said, interviewing so many different authors, somebody has something different to say. No one has said, I start my book with a question. And that is perfect, because when you start with a question, you know where you want to end up. And you know what you want to answer. And then you have a loose outline that allows you the freedom to, as the story develops, change it. Like you did. You started one place and you went back and started somewhere else, where a more rigid author would be, no, I'm not going to do that. And, they may or may not go on to write a successful novel. But with your flexibility, you knew where, you knew where you needed to be. And I think that's very good advice for people, answering a question, because every book has a story, and, well, of course, because they are stories, but every book has a purpose. And you already know the purpose of your book before you start writing. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think if it's not interesting to the writer, it's not going to be interesting to the reader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't write it just because, write it because you have a purpose and you're emotionally tied to it. If you're not emotionally tied to it, other people are not going to feel it, and they're not going to be emotionally tied to it either.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, Mohana, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Do you have any parting thoughts for aspiring writers out there? Just what would you tell someone that came up to you? I mean, you do teach, so, what are some of the first things that you tell people? I'm pretty harsh. I mean, I'm not harsh in the sense that I'm mean and like, oh, do you really have a story to tell? But I'm pretty harsh in the sense that I ask people to be really honest with themselves about what it is that they want out of writing. Because, oftentimes, people will say, oh, I just want to publish a book. And then suddenly they're talking about, ways to get paid for publishing. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, which is it? Do you want to publish a book or do you want to make money? Because those are two very different things. Totally.
And people, I kind of get in trouble sometimes for saying that, but it's the truth. And I think especially writing is sort of like getting married. There's a huge industry out there that will take you for a ride if you let them, You could get married just going down to the courthouse and being done with it, or you can have this huge, like Kim Kardashian style. But, it's up to you. So I really ask people to be honest with themselves. Like, why are you writing? Is it to tell a family story? Is it to show? I mean, for me, the way I answer this question is because I don't feel that anyone else, and I don't mean this in like an arrogant way, but I don't really feel that anyone else is telling the type of stories that I'm telling. People, if they're writing about the Middle East, they're writing about it as, an expat from afar, or they're writing about it like kind of in a nostalgic, like The Kite Runner, for example. People aren't writing about the Middle East right now as it's happening right now to real people. And that's why I'm writing. So I say, be really honest about why you're writing, who you're writing for. I'm writing for that person out there that would love to travel, might not have the time or the resources or, have other considerations. And so they do it through books. And what you want to get out of it. And so for me right now, it's about giving these books the right to kind of exist that agents and other people have denied them. And obviously there's a longer term plan, but for the short term, I know these are the 3 reasons why I'm doing it. And that's why all the choices that I make sense. But often when people aren't honest with themselves, that's when you get the kind of stopping and starting and the, I'm writing a paranormal, erotic, or dark urban fantasy, or like people. What is it? Just stop and ask yourself, what is it that you're really trying to say, and what is the story that you're trying to tell, and why?
Yeah.
And you can answer those questions, then I think you've done yourself a huge, huge service. And
then you can go from there.
Exactly.
That's perfect. And that's it. You just wrapped it up in a nutshell. So, Mohana, where can people find you on the internet? A lot of people that listen to our podcasts listen to them, via iTunes or on an iPod, and they're not necessarily next to their computers. Where can people go and find you, and kind of spell out, where they are?
Sure. Well, I think the easiest thing to do, even if you're not on Twitter, the fastest Google search will be the Twitter one. So, which is just the @ Moha, MOHA _ Doha, DOHA. So if you Google that, you'll get my website. I have a Facebook page. I'm on Pinterest. There's lots of ways for you to follow up with me. Or if you go to Amazon, you can, because all my books are in the KDP Select program. You can just put in Love Comes Later, and that's my latest release. That's the love triangle set in Qatar.
I'm going to go borrow your book.
Please do, and drop me a line. Let me know what you thought.
Well, and what people might not know about the KDP Select is that if you are an Amazon Prime member and you have an Amazon Kindle, you can borrow a book and take your time reading it, and when you're done reading it, you have to give it back. But by borrowing the book, the author still makes money. And last month it was $2. And, some books are priced in a way that the author makes more money if you borrow it than if you bought it. So, there's 99-cent books out there that get borrowed, and people made $2 off of them. So if you're on Kindle, and you want to allow Amazon to be your exclusive place to find your book for 90-day chunks of time, people can borrow your books and read them, and then, hey, if I like a book after I borrow it, I'm going to buy it. So yeah. It gives people a nice way to get your book and get to know your writing.
And absolutely, and even if someone borrows a book, they return it, but they write a review. We could talk for hours about how hard reviews are to get. And that alone is worth, the opportunity to borrow.
Yep, that's excellent. And also for KDP Select people, if you go to BookGoodies.com, where this podcast will be posted, up at the top there is tell us about your free Kindle days, so that you can go pop in there and tell us when your books are going to be free to download for the people that, maybe you get a couple hundred downloads, and maybe out of that 5 or 6 people do a review. And, KDP Select gives you the option of having your book free for 5 days during that 90-day period. And I found that to be very successful to get reviews. And get your hands into the people that, when you have a free day, let them know. It's free.
I will be doing that on Friday then.
All right.
Some free days coming up, so you'll be seeing me again.
Definitely. Well, like I said, this has been a really great interview. I hope that we can talk to you again in the future, follow up with you and see how you're doing. And if you have any topics that you want to share with our readers, we can do specialty topics with you as well. For those of you listening, you can go to BookGoodies.com, BookGoodies.com. And like I said, at the top of the page, you can tell us when your Kindle book is free. There's a link to tell us about your book, so that you can put your book information on our website. And there's also a place where you can offer to be either a podcast guest or give us a topic that you would like to have me go out and find people to talk to about. And we have a lot of really great authors in our podcast series that can cover a variety of topics, and we'd love to hear from our listeners what it is you want to hear. And also do a search for Mohana on our website. Mohana, sorry.
That's okay.
Mohana on our website, and you'll find the podcast with the show notes, which will have all the information and links to her social media and to her Twitter and her book. So thanks everybody for listening. We want to thank geekcast.fm for hosting all of our podcasts. And you can head on over there if you want to find other books, other podcasts about our authors and about internet marketing and marketing in general. And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to deborahcarney.com. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Mohana, for being with us and sharing your time and knowledge with us. And everybody get writing and have a great day.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.